2024-2025 winter forecast. And I'm not gonna lie, first thing I'll say, the winter looks horrible, but you gotta still have hope. You gotta still have hope. It looks like a torch fest, and it also looks dry. So, unfortunate. But anyway, I'll run through the models. First of all, this is the CFS model. It's a ridging fest. It's a party of ridging. You can see across North America, ridging in Greenland, ridging all throughout the U.S. This is November, by the way. The only area of low pressure we really have is into Siberia, Alaska, and far northwestern Canada. This will lead to above normal temperatures for the most part in November. November isn't really winter. Not too concerned about this. This is whatever. In fact, I would say if we're gonna have all that cold locked up in the north, it's a good idea to have it in November so we can build that snow cover. So this is fine. We start to get problems in December. It's warm. We have this warmer than average or blocking high over Alaska. That's a signal for a La Nina. Typically happens in La Nina. This is also a signal for positive NAO. So that's horrible. That means that there's less cold air outbreaks in the east. We don't like that because that means less snow. We also have a presence of a south central ridge, but also southeastern ridge. I think that's going to happen quite a bit this winter with this negative PDO. I'll get into that later. No low pressure whatsoever to speak of except for in Greenland, which is the worst area to have low pressure if you want cold and snow. So December looks kind of cooked. January looks less cooked if you're in the north. So I think that we'll start to see some of that cold we typically see in La Nina start to get injected into that northern U.S., into the northern plains, the upper Midwest, I think the Pacific Northwest. And I'll get to my forecast later. I do have a forecast. And this is something that we see more typically in La Nina, blocking high over Alaska, between Alaska and Siberia. Very typical of La Nina. We have a southwestern ridge and also a ridge in southeastern. I think the mid-Atlantic will be more of a neutral pattern and maybe also ridging. So that's the heights on the CFS in January. In February, it's more of the same, except you get this positive NAO that we didn't have in January. So January is mostly neutral in Greenland, and then it's quite positive NAO in February. So the NAO is positive for 2 out of 3 months, and we don't get any real troughing in the U.S. In all 3 January, February, December months, May, winter months. It might be over. So this does not make me very excited. I'll replay it again. And also March doesn't make me very excited. March looks similar to January in terms of the height. So you get cold, maybe into the northern U.S., but to be honest with you, for the most part, it's locked up in Canada. A lot of this cold will be locked up in Canada, according to the CFS model. In terms of the actual temperature anomaly, it's showing similar things to what the heights are showing, but they're quite similar. So November, it's colder than in Siberia and not as warm in Alaska. It's warmer than all across all of the U.S. That doesn't really change in December. However, in January, you do get some colder air. It's most of the worst or the best anomalies, depending on how you look at it, are locked up in Canada. It's like 5 to 7 degrees below average. This is like 3 to 5. The stuff that's in the states like North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Montana are like 0.75 to like 1.5. So it's not as below normal. So you got all that cold air locked up in northwestern Canada. This probably means a trough is going to develop in western Canada, which again is going to lead to that southeastern ridge. So I think it will develop a lot this winter. It's January, February is more of the same, but you get even more air, more warm air injected into the United States. And the Pacific jet is going to do a lot of that, to be honest with you. So this looks not very good, I won't lie to you. And then March, more of the same, but you get that cold push even further north. So the CFS is dooming in terms of the El Nino or La Nina on it. I'll go to that. It predicts a central Pacific La Nina for the most part. However, this La Nina is predicted to rapidly fall apart, and that's something we've seen on a lot of models, and this is El Nino, though it's too far out to say anything about that. Central Pacific, this looks like a Central Pacific La Nina. with a negative PD overall. All that cold is locked up in the north, which would be pretty horrible. But hopefully this doesn't verify. Definitely hoping it doesn't. Also, this colder water off the coast of Alaska isn't good. It's usually not helpful for Arctic blasts. It's usually dishelpful. So it's another thing to note with the SSTs. Central Pacific wouldn't be good, although the things I'm seeing, like quote unquote experts, don't seem to suggest Central Pacific, although I'm not smart enough to know what they're talking about, to be honest with you. But I've just seen some people saying that the model showing Central Pacific is kind of weird. Anyway, that's a CFS model. It wants to doom. I'm not surprised. I would doom too, but don't worry, my forecast doesn't doom. This is concepts. Let's go over the the ENSO, whatever probabilities. This is November. It's still going to be neutral now. This is December, still neutral, but this might be weak La Nina. I can't even tell. I think this is neutral though, because I can't read the exact where the exact temperatures are, and it stays at ENSO neutral, or cold ENSO neutral, I should say. This is cold neutral, or very weak La Nina. There's not too much of a difference. 0.4, 0.6. I mean, it's a difference, but it's not huge. So cold neutral sells a lot of the same patterns that weak La Nina does. Not the same, but it's similar. If you know what I mean. And we might be in cold neutral, honestly, in February, but we won't be in a La Nina in December. But anyway, much lower than average SSTs than in terms of the averages, higher SSTs technically than the CFS, and also the cooler waters are based more in the Eastern Pacific. So East Pacific cold neutral looks to be what the CANCIPS is saying, and no, that's not right. That translates into colder air actually in the non-December, but overall into the U.S. So in December and November, again, it's a ridging party. There's zero troughing to speak of. Pretty much warm across the board. It looks even warmer than the CFS model, even in Alaska and Siberia. And then December, things start to get interesting. You still have this blocking high over Alaska and Siberia, so there might be some things we typically see in La Nina still here, but I think that the cold on the CANCIPS doesn't look like it here. But believe me, when I saw the temperatures, the cold on the CANCIPS is being pushed further south in January and February. I think that's something that's going to happen. I agree with the CANCIPS more. In January and March, January, February, and March are a lot of the same, and they look to be colder than December. December looks torch on the CANCIPS. But even though the heights look similar to the CFS, I think the cold will push further south, and also the model's showing it. So anyway, if we go to the temperature anomaly, see for November, mostly above normal, maybe slightly below normal for the southeast, but for the most part it's above normal, and maybe slightly normal for the eastern U.S., but overall it's above normal. Then to December, this is an odd pocket of cold, I won't lie to you, in Wisconsin and Michigan, but that might verify, but we have a not much cold there to speak of, less warm than the CFS, I will say though. And then December, this is not December, January, so I'm talking about that cold air being pushed further south all the way into Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. It's less warm in the southeast. And in February and March, that cold starts to be pushed further north. And that warmth kind of stays the same in the southeast. Interesting setup from the CANCIPS, I won't lie. And the NAO looks similar to the CFS, except maybe a bit more negative. So I forgot to talk about that. In terms of the last model I'll talk about is the MME, which doesn't have heights, by the way. This is the 2-meter temperature anomaly, and what we see is warmth across the entire continent, pretty much. Still warm. There's really no cold air to speak of. You finally get some cold in Western Canada in January. It's cold in Greenland. That's indicative of positive NAO again. And we go through this run and we see all that cold air is locked up in Western Canada. It's locked up in Greenland. It's locked up in these cold spots. And it doesn't look that a lot of it is going to be spilling out into the U.S. So it looks bad. All the models are dooming. They're very pessimistic. And in terms of precipitation, honestly, this is a pretty good representation, I feel like, of the precipitation and how they're doing with precipitation. So little to no little precipitation in the southeast, up the mid-Atlantic and northeast states, and it just looks drier than normal across portions of the southeast and California, southwest. And there's not even a lot of wet conditions in the Pacific Northwest, which is unusual. So yeah, March looks like more like La Nina. But I think this is a good representation of uh, the precipitation. Now, that's the models. In terms of the ENSO probabilities, this is iri.columbia.edu. So like they have a ENSO forecast, and they have a separate one. So this is their forecast, and this is CPC's NOAA's forecast. I honestly think their forecast is better. They basically raise the probability of ENSO neutral by 10% to whatever CPC has. So I'll give you an example. 40% for September, October, November becomes 50%. About 38% for October, November, December becomes about 28%. 25% for November, December, January becomes about 35%. And then you have about 28% for December, January, February becomes about close to 40%, maybe 39, 38. So you get the pattern. They're adding basically 10% to whatever, and maybe, I don't know which one came out first, to be honest with you. But either CPC's subtracting 10 or adding 10. And I don't think they're doing this on purpose, obviously. I don't think they're collaborating, but that is something that's interesting. Roughly 10% is being added to the our IRI probabilities. The neutral probabilities do rise as we get into spring. That's probably something that happens. So does El Nino, although I won't talk about that. So spring looks to be neutral. I do agree with this one more. I think we have about 4 in 10 chance of being in a cold neutral. It would be a cold neutral, wouldn't be a warm neutral, which is something to note. We also have all the other factors that I'll talk about, such as the PDO, which I'll get to next. But that's it. This is the patterns. Really, I mean, not the patterns. This is the forecast. Really, nothing to talk about. Yeah, this is just the forecast. So I do agree with this one more, and we can see that I'll need that neutral starts to rise, especially as you get into later winter. I do think February is going to have neutral patterns. I definitely think we'll have neutral conditions by February, especially late February, no matter really what happens in December and January. So that's my take on this. And then I'll also show this. So the stat averages are showing the neutral conditions, and then the dynamic averages show La Nina conditions, but a weak La Nina. So we'll have to see what happens. That's the forecast for ENSO. Negative PDO. We will be in a negative PDO, unfortunately. This is the analog years, like these analog years. Percentage of years having above average trend in temperature in December through February. This looks a lot like a negative PDO. We have this trough developing in Western Canada. Some of that cold air spills into portions of the far north, far northwest, far north central. But southeastern ridge tries to develop, and that warmth goes all the way up the east coast. I think the northeast won't be as warm this winter, especially when it's given to ENSO neutral conditions, and I'll talk about that later. But this is the negative PDO effects, and we'll be in a strong negative PDO. So this is something that oftentimes happens. Super unfortunate if you like cold and snow in the east, but it's just the reality. I don't know when it's going to flip. It usually flips every 20 to 30 years. I believe it flipped last time in 1998, although that might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But hopefully it flips soon and we can get that cold air into the east. But obviously, this doesn't mean cold can't occur in the east. It's been like this for 30 years, and many winters have had cold air in the east. So this isn't an end all be all, but yeah, it's unfortunate if you like cold and snow in the east. So that's just another reason to doom, unfortunately. Um, this is the typical pattern for ENSO neutral. So let's go over ENSO neutral, like over La Nina, not going over El Nino because there's no point to it because there's not going to be an El Nino. So what we can see is that we have a pretty strong Atlantic jet stream extended. The subtropical jet, unlike La Nina, still has some influence in ENSO neutral, and the Pacific jet has some influence too, but not as much as La Nina. The polar jet also has some influence, but not as much as La Nina. So they all kind of have the same influence. Maybe the subtropical jet will have less influence because it's going to be cold neutral. That's another thing to note. Colder all the way into Canada, northern Canada, into northeastern Canada, and in the northeast U.S. is colder than normal. The southeast U.S. is wetter than normal. The south west and south central states and far southeast are warmer than normal. And this is often what we see in typical ENSO neutral conditions. You can see this is the best case scenario for the Northeast, for the cities along I-95 in terms of cold. Not necessarily snow. El Nino is probably better, especially for the southern states, southern mid-Atlantic and Northeast. It's better in El Nino. In the northern Northeast is better in ENSO neutral. But that's the pattern. And then La Nina. This is fairly different pattern. That cold we see in Western Canada and the northern U.S., north central, northwestern U.S. to be specific, not the northeastern U.S. Dry conditions across the south. You get the southeastern ridge tries to develop in La Nina, and wetter conditions across the Ohio Valley. This is what we're seeing a lot in our models, unfortunately, and it's taking it to the not extreme, but it's definitely much colder than normal here and definitely much warmer than normal here across the southeast. So that's unfortunate, but some winters are just like that, you know. But yeah, this is the La Nina pattern. We have this variable Pacific jet, and that's actually crucial because it determines how much warm air is being injected into the U.S. But I think a lot of warm air is going to be injected into the U.S. this winter, especially in the southern states. So it's the La Nina pattern. This is the Climate Prediction Center temperature and precipitation outlook before I give my forecast. So below normal temperatures across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and portions of North Dakota and South Dakota. This is only the far northern part of Oregon and northern part of Idaho. And above normal temperatures across the rest of the country, and equal chances across much of the central states and western Ohio Valley. Precipitation is pretty much a north-south split. Most of the northern U.S. you're seeing above normal temperatures. Most of the southern U.S. you're seeing below normal, not temperatures, precipitation. So above normal precipitation, below normal precipitation, and then most of the central states you're seeing average precipitation, equal chances, I should say. So that's a north-south split. Also a north-south split in terms of temperature. Not surprising, it is a La Nina. So I am not surprised that they're expecting it to be La Nina. This assumes La Nina. This is definitely not assuming ENSO neutral, which is something to note. I do think that this is too far below in the far southern U.S. I do think that subtropical jet will be a bit active. Obviously not as much as last year, but for a very weak La Nina or cold neutral, I'm not sure about this far below normal probability. But we'll see. In general, I do agree with this. This is maybe too doomy. I know I've said that there's reasons to doom, but there's also reasons not to doom. There's some signs that the polar vortex might stay weak. For example, the Siberian snow cover is above normal, so those are two reasons not to doom. But in general, I do agree with this, but it's not my forecast. So this is my forecast. It Okay. Okay. It's being annoying. All right. So I got it back. Sorry about that, guys. Man, I'll just explain the forecast. Um, new temperature first. I'm going to see below normal temperatures in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. I think we're going to get a lot of that in January, especially really cold air. They're going to be cold air shots from Western Canada. I also think Northern California and Northern Nevada and Northern Utah will also get in on that below normal action. So what this green means is that there's a split. So in Southern California, Southern Nevada, Southern Utah, I think they'll be above normal. I think in Northern Utah, Northern Nevada, Northern California, they'll be below normal. In terms of the Southwest, I think it'll be far above normal. There'll be a persistent ridge there, similar to the Southeast. So Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina are all projected to be, in my opinion, far above normal. In terms of temperatures, I really don't see persistent cold in terms of anomalies. I don't see any like Arctic air outbreaks reaching these states. They usually don't. I think the probability is lower this year. I think Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and North Carolina are as far south. I think they'll still have some cold shots that can reach them, especially in January. I feel like will be the coldest month. It usually is. Um, they still will be influenced by that southeastern ridge that's going to try to develop most of the winter. But I do think they can be from that cold shots that are coming from Western Canada that I think will mainly affect these states will also be able to affect them somewhat. So they're not as far above normal. Colorado's also in that mix. And then we also have Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Mid Atlantic, Delaware, New Jersey, and Virginia, all slightly, very slightly above normal because they're more north. So I think they can be impacted even more by these Arctic blasts and generally in La Nina, we see this more north-south split. So the more if you are, the better chances you have of seeing above normal, not less above normal, than the further south you are, because most places are seeing above normal. Um, that would be my main prediction. The temperatures for like the Ohio Valley, Southern Ohio Valley, and Mid Atlantic, slightly above normal. Then for the Northeast, I think you guys are seeing, I think it's gonna be average to maybe slightly above average, but I say not to put the slightly above average colors because I think as we go into neutral in February, as I showed those neutral conditions, I think there could be a lot of cold shots here in the Northeast. But I do think the New York City will be above average. That's something so, but I couldn't just put it in New York City. So I'll just say that. I think Michigan will be similar. I think it will be about average to maybe slightly below average, but I don't look at any colors. Last but not least, we have this light blue color, which means slightly below average. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Iowa. I think we'll also get a lot of cold shots from Western Canada. Obviously, the further north you are, the more chance you have, and if you know we can't get some of that cold air into the West, that would be nice. Rather than Canada hogging all of it, which could still happen. This could not verify the entire U.S. torches, and this is even warmer than normal, and everything is warmer than normal. I really don't see it being a lot colder than normal. I think there's a lot of potential for nothingness this winter, which is too unfortunate. But yeah, that's my temperature forecast, my precipitation forecast. Much of the same. This white indicates the similar things to what the green indicated. So in Northern California, Northern Nevada, Northern Utah, Northern Colorado, I'll see above normal precipitation, and the Southeast below normal. So I'll just get that over with real quick. In terms of far above normal, I think Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. This is the typical Pacific Northwest. Often sees a lot of storms in La Nina and cold neutral. I think in terms of snowfall, by the way, I think if you live in one of these states, you're going to be living life because I think you're going to get a lot of snow this winter. Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Michigan, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. All of these states are expected to be above normal, but not far above normal in terms of precipitation. I think you're going to see a lot of storms that go into the Ohio Valley, maybe up the northeast and hit them. Maybe I think you're going to see a lot of storm track like this. But some of them might go south, some of them might track more like that, some probably rarely. It's more of an El Nino track like that. We'll have to see though. And then for slightly above normal, I have Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and Maryland, because I do think, and also Delaware. And I do believe that it'll also be north-south split, so the further north you are in general, and also west you are, the more precipitation you'll see, unless you're in the desert southwest. So I think the northwest part of the country sees the most precipitation. Southwest sees the least, which is my drier than average forecast, which states I think going to be drier than average. I think Arizona is going to be drier than average. New Mexico is going to be drier than average, and they're far drier than average. Anomalies due to that lack of a subtropical jet. That lack of a subtropical jet also going to cause drier than average conditions over Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Slightly below average conditions in terms of precipitation below Arkansas and Oklahoma. So that does it for my forecast. I'm not doing a snow forecast because I don't like doing snow forecasts. It's too hard to predict. But I'll do one quickly. I didn't make one. In this area, Pacific Northwest is above normal snow. Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. I think all its areas seeing above normal snow. I think honestly all of the northern U.S. I think the central U.S. sees about normal, maybe below normal snow, probably below normal snow for the most part. But I do think states like Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, when you have a lot of storm systems moving through, could see above normal snow. But I think the Mid Atlantic will see below normal snow. I think Southeast is going to see below normal snow. I think the states that I listed with Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and California, the southern portion of the states especially could see below normal snow. I think actually they will see below normal snow. So that's mainly my snow forecast for this winter, and also my precipitation and my temperature. It doesn't look good, I will say that, but you just gotta hope for the